In the heart of Ohio lies the small town of Circleville, a quiet community where families grew up together, where everyone knew your name and your secrets. But in 1976, someone began writing letters, threatening letters, personal letters, letters that knew too much. They came without a name, without a face, without even a single fingerprint. And soon, what started as a whisper campaign turned into full blown terror, exposing affairs, predicting accidents, and possibly orchestrating murder. This is not just the story of one letter writer, it's the story of fear, obsession, and the unraveling of an entire town. Welcome to the Midnight Mystery Archive. Tonight, we open the mailbox and delve in to the Circleville Letters. It began in 1976. The first letters were mailed to local school bus driver Mary Gillespie. The content was chilling. Accusations that she was having an affair with the school superintendent, Gordon Massey. The letter knew details no one should have known: where she lived, what route she drove, the fact that she had a daughter in school. The writer claimed to be watching her, always watching her, and threatened to expose her if she didn't end the alleged affair. I know where you live. I've been watching you. Stop what you're doing or everyone will know the truth. Mary, understandably shaken, told her husband Ron, but they decided to keep it quiet at first. Perhaps it was a prank. Maybe it would just go away. But it didn't. The letters kept coming. To Mary, to her family, even to school officials. The accusations became more specific and the threats more intense. The writer seemed to know every move Mary made. Eventually, Mary and Ron confided in Ron's sister and her husband, Karen and Paul Freshour. The group crafted a plan: send anonymous letters of their own to who they suspected might be behind it, essentially saying, "We know who you are. Stop." For a time, it worked. The letters stopped, but only for a time. In 1977, tragedy struck. Ron Gillespie, Mary's husband, received a phone call that seemed to confirm the writer's identity. Furious, he grabbed his gun and stormed out of the house and never returned home. His truck was later found crashed into a tree, and he was dead. But what really raised eyebrows? The sheriff initially ruled it an accident, yet the gun had been fired. No one ever explained why, and no fingerprints were found on the weapon. Was Ron lured out? Was he confronting someone? Was it suicide, or something even darker? The letters resumed, and now they were being mailed not just to Mary, but across town. Dozens of people received them: politicians, teachers, private citizens. The writer seemed to know everyone's secrets and wasn't afraid to threaten exposure. Circleville began to change. People checked their mailboxes with dread. Families stopped trusting neighbors. Town officials were overwhelmed with complaints and suspicion. The letter writer had done more than just threaten Mary Gillespie. They had hijacked the town's sense of safety. In the span of a year, Circleville had become a real-world paranoia thriller, and it was only the beginning. As the 1980s dawned, the letters continued, now often signed with cryptic threats or chilling phrases. But something new entered the picture: signs. Hand-painted placards started appearing along Mary Gillespie's bus route, often obscene, always threatening. They targeted her children, her job, and repeated the claims about her alleged affair. On one morning in February 1983, Mary had just had enough. She stopped the bus and tore down one of the signs, only to find it was booby-trapped. Behind the sign was a box rigged with a string and a small pistol. If it had worked properly, it would have fired a bullet at whoever pulled it down. It was no longer just an obnoxious form of harassment. It was attempted murder. Police traced the gun in the trap to none other than Paul Freshour, Mary's former brother-in-law, the same man who helped write warning letters years earlier. Paul denied having anything to do with it. He said the gun had been stolen from his garage, and yet a handwriting analysis suggested similarities between Paul's writing and the letters. More damning, authorities claimed he failed a polygraph. In 1983, Paul Freshour was arrested, charged with attempted murder, and later convicted. He was sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison. It seemed like clean resolution. The letters had finally stopped. Except they hadn't. While Paul Freshour sat behind bars in solitary confinement with no access to pen or paper, inexplicably, the letters resumed. Not just a few, dozens. Some were sent to the police, others to media outlets. The writer mocked the justice system, claimed Paul was innocent, and even challenged journalists to dig deeper. "You have not solved anything. Sheriff Radcliffe knows what he did. The people know. Freshour is not the writer." It was a contradiction no one could explain. If Paul was the author, how was he still writing from prison? If he wasn't, then who was? Paul's conviction raised serious questions. He was never charged with sending the letters, only with setting the trap. There were reports the handwriting analysis was flawed, that the prosecution relied on circumstantial evidence. And even odder, Paul himself had received letters while in prison, taunting him. "Now, when are you going to believe you aren't getting out of here? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up." Even the FBI couldn't explain it. They investigated quietly, but concluded only that there wasn't enough hard evidence to definitively name the writer or writers. Some suspected Paul's ex-wife, Karen, orchestrated the letters out of spite. Others believed the local sheriff's office had more to hide than they let on. Despite the conviction, the signs continued to appear. The letters never truly stopped, and the deeper people looked, the more tangled the web became. Paul Freshour was eventually paroled in 1994, and he spent the rest of his life proclaiming his innocence, even launching a website to investigate the case. He died in 2012, with the mystery still unsolved. The Circleville Letters defy simple explanation. Hundreds of messages, dozens of targets, and a town engulfed in paranoia. But was it the work of one person or many? The simplest theory, and the one law enforcement believed, was that Paul Freshour was the letter writer. His motive? Some suggest it was jealousy or resentment. Others think he had an axe to grind with local officials. He had access to the gun, possible ties to Mary's family drama, and his handwriting allegedly matched. But here's the problem. Letters kept arriving even after Paul was locked in solitary confinement. The Ohio prison system insisted it was impossible for him to send them, and yet they came, with postmarks, verified mailings, and all, unless he had help or wasn't the writer at all. Another popular theory points to Karen Freshour, Paul's ex-wife. She had motive: a bitter divorce, accusations of abuse, and possible knowledge of Paul's personal grievances. Some theorists argue she planted the gun trap, wrote the letters, and let Paul take the fall. Others believe she may have worked in tandem with someone else, perhaps even a law enforcement insider. It's worth noting, Karen was never formally investigated, and she denied any involvement. Another theory dives deep into conspiracy territory. Some believe the Circleville letters may have been retaliation for uncovering local corruption, or a smokescreen used by someone in power. One letter specifically accused the sheriff of being involved in a cover-up surrounding a school employee. Could a member of law enforcement have written the letters, had access to case files, or ensured Paul was framed to keep the heat off? There's never been proof, just speculation. But the fact that the letters continued despite increased security and scrutiny only fueled the fire of the idea of a law enforcement cover-up. Another thought, could the Circleville letters have come from more than one person? A cabal of townspeople working together? Small groups seeking to expose hypocrisy and corruption in their community. Some researchers believe the stylistic changes in the letters, tone, grammar, handwriting, suggest multiple authors. Others point out that so many people were targeted that it would have been very hard for a single person to possess all that knowledge. Perhaps it was just a lone crusader, someone obsessed with justice, twisted by righteousness, who believed that they were doing the town a favor by calling out affairs, corruption, and secrets. The anonymous writer often portrayed themselves as a sort of moral enforcer punishing wrongdoers. If you think the law is going to protect you, think again. I know what you've done. The town knows, and justice is coming. Eventually, the letters stopped, just as mysteriously as they had started. No arrest, no final reveal, no deathbed confession. The Circleville Letters case remains one of the most unnerving cold cases in American history, and a reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters don't need masks, they just need a pencil and paper. By the early 1990s, the town of Circleville, Ohio was quiet again. The signs had vanished, the letters stopped arriving, but the damage had already been done. And the mystery, that was just beginning to spread. In 1994, NBC's Unsolved Mysteries, hosted by Robert Stack, featured the Circleville Letters in a chilling segment. It was the first time the case had been presented to a national audience, complete with reenactments, letter excerpts, and voiceovers from residents. The show reignited public interest in the mystery. Viewers wrote in with tips, theories, and their own hometown stories of anonymous harassment. But despite the renewed attention, no new suspects emerged, just more questions. Paul Freshour never gave up. From the moment he was released from prison in 1994 until his death in 2012, he maintained his innocence. He built a website chronicling the inconsistencies in the investigation, posting redacted documents, and inviting the public to judge the facts for themselves. He even reached out to journalists and podcasters in the early 2000s, hoping someone would take a fresh look. But no one ever took up the case officially again. The file was closed. The letters became folklore. Ask people in Circleville about the letters today, and you'll get mixed reactions. Some remember the fear. Others dismiss it as overblown. A few residents say they still have letters tucked away in drawers, eerie keepsakes from a time when everyone was afraid their secrets would be exposed. And every so often, someone will get an anonymous note in the mail, a veiled threat, a cryptic warning, just enough to stir up that old anxiety again. So the lingering questions are this: who had the time, the insight, the obsession to pull this off? Was it Paul Freshour, his ex-wife, a rogue official, or did someone else seize the opportunity to settle old scores hidden behind the mask of the Circleville writer? In the end, We'll probably never know. The letters were personal, specific, and relentless. Not just words on a page, but calculated acts of psychological warfare. And that's probably the most terrifying part. Not that someone sent them, but that the writer knew exactly where to strike and who to hit, and how deeply the ink from their pen would bleed into the hearts and minds of those who received the letters. This is the Midnight Mystery Archive. This is Kevin, and we will see you on our next episode. You've just heard another journey into the shadows from the Midnight Mystery Archive, where the past whispers and the unknown waits in silence. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. You can also listen and watch on YouTube, where each case comes with visuals that bring the mystery to life. New episodes drop Tuesday and Friday, bringing you deeper into the world's darkest, unsolved mysteries, forgotten crimes, and chilling disappearances. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your lights low. Some stories aren't over. They're just waiting to